Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first video of my new channel. Today I'll be talking about why you should not buy cheap filament for your 3D printer. There are many reasons why you might buy cheap filament. One could be because you're just trying to save a couple dollars. Another one would be because you're working on a very large project. And 3, you might just be starting and want to get as many different colors as possible. Now those might seem like reasonable reasons why you would buy cheap filament. Well, I'm going to tell you why those are wrong. First of all, to save money. There are so many reasons why that filament might be cheap. Could be, a bad spool, a bad quality control. This back plate, which is a large flat piece with a couple walls on the side. Well, you think that might be pretty easy. Now, I keep my CR10 mini bed pretty level, and I constantly clean it. Now, I was using some very cheap white filament. This stuff was not the greatest. It was very brittle, especially for PLA. Well, PLA is a pretty brittle filament, but this was especially brittle. For example, the backplate I was making, you can see here that even though my CR10 bed was very level and I clean it constantly, there was a slight lift to it. Now, this is salvageable for what I need. It doesn't need to be completely flat. But you can see why that might be an issue if you're working on other things. Now, I have a second 3D printer, the Anycubic Mega X, and I actually printed this design to it. I'm obviously a big Office fan. This goes on top of the backplate, and then you'll have your sign. Well, this was printed on my Anycubic Mega X. And yes, that's a different printer. But I was also using different filament. This was made out of 3D Solidtech Real Black PLA, I believe. That was a really good spool. You can see in the video, right up here, that the spooling was actually very well done. Now, one of the reasons why spooling really matters is because this is the second go of printing this plate. The first one, there was a knot in the in the spooling, there's a tangle, and then as I was printing, the extruder was pulling the entire spool of filament, trying to pull it through the extruder. Thankfully, my extruder is not that strong, so it just eventually wore off and broke. Well, the filament did. Well, that could end terribly. For example, what if your filament is connected to your entire 3D printer? Well, then it's going to just rip apart your 3D printer. Now, to go on to the larger prints. For example, I wouldn't say this is a necessarily large 3D print. This is pretty large for my CR10 Mini. If I used Hatchbox PLA, which is my pretty much go-to filament, that would have cost me about $5. Using this cheap $15 spool, it was a lot less. Well, not that much. Now, taken into the fact that the first go I had with this, I had to throw that away because it was unusable. Now, you might think that if you're working on a large project and say you needed to buy 10 spools, well, my go-to Hatchbox PLA is about $20 per spool. And if you got the cheap stuff, about 15 or so, then you would save about $50. However, as you can see with this, that can lead to disaster and you'll have to throw whatever it is away. Therefore, you're losing a lot of money on filament if you just have to throw something away because it lifted up and then spaghettified everywhere. Now you're also wasting a lot of 3D printing time, which if you're working on a large project, let's say it takes 200 hours, and you lose 20 hours of that print, well, that's pretty much an entire day wasted. Now, lastly, you might have just got to your 3D printer, and you want to get as many different colors of filament as possible. So, what you do is that you go on Amazon, and then you do the sort by lowest price. And then you get stuck with these cheap filaments that aren't that great. And then you order a bunch, and then when they arrive 2 days later, you realize that they are just not that great. They are brittle, they are constantly tangled, and they're curling off your bed. And that's very frustrating for a beginner. I That's what I did. I bought some very cheap filaments and I got very demotivated on trying to fix the problem because it was a filament issue. I really recommend Hatchbox PLA. That stuff has not given me pretty much a single issue. Now, I also am trying out 3D Solutech. I've had a couple of their spools and they seem to work so far. It's not that much. You don't have to go out and buy 30, 40, $50 spools of filament. $20 is the sweet spot that I found for filament.